Hey guys, today we're going to talk about Thieves. This is the regular Thieves, and it also comes in a Vitality version too. I have one with a little roller top on it because we roll that on our feet every day. But there's something really cool, and I want to tell you the story behind Thieves if you've never heard about this before. So this is actually a blend that Gary Young made around 1990-91, and it was created as a result of studying at the Warwick University in London, England. And he spent many hours at this library researching oils and oil history. So Gary actually read 17 different versions of the story of the thieves during the plague of the 1700s. Now, there also was a plague in the 1400s, and there was a story written about thieves then. So I'm going to tell you about this story that Gary, this is the back history of how this oil was actually developed. So the thieves happened to have been merchants and spice traders, and that's how they knew about oils, because they were actually importing cinnamon and clove from India. And when the plague hit, the king of the various countries sent out a mandate closing down the international commerce and shipping. So all of the ships were docked and they couldn't sell and they couldn't engage in their business, and they were actually going broke. So the spice trade was a very lucrative trade and they made money at it. So they decided, well, all these people are dying and they're afraid to touch them. Let's go out and loot the bodies and take the things off of them and their homes when everyone is dead. And then they were gonna set like pots and pans and jewelries and clothing and set up pawn shops. So Gary's like, well, here's where the pawn shops started evolving. So of course you've heard, many of you, if you've been around, you've heard that the king issued actually a proclamation to have the thieves captured. But the constables were afraid to touch them because they knew that they had been touching the dead bodies, and they were going in the homes of the dead people, and everyone who did that died. And so they didn't want to go take care of, like, get these people. So it became so severe that the king even executed a few of the constables that refused to go capture these thieves. So finally, when it was a life or death issue, the story goes on that there were 4 of these thieves that were actually caught. And so the king gave them an opportunity to confess the secret of their immunity, either with the choice of burning at the stake or being hung by the neck, meaning if they didn't give up their secret, they would be burned at the stake. And worse, if they gave up their secret, they would be hung by the neck, and they chose hanging. So when they gave up their secret, it was then published and plastered all throughout the town. So the oils in, how did Gary develop this then? The oils in the 17 different stories and versions that he found when he was researching this, he said that like no one knows 100% sure exactly what was it that they were using. But let's narrow it down. He said they definitely knew that oregano, cinnamon, and clove were oils that were traded at that time. And we know that because of the power of cinnamon and clove were most likely the 2 choices that these thieves were using. Most of the 17 stories listed clove and listed cinnamon. So taking that, Gary then looked at it, and he went back and started looking at some of the stories and going through the oils and looking at their chemistry structure to determine what to use. Now, back then, they didn't have access to all the oils that we do nowadays. So Gary asked the question, like, do we duplicate exactly what they were doing, or can we make it better? And his feeling was, you know what? We can look at what they did and make it even better for today. However, in the other stories, it was cinnamon, clove, oregano, rosemary. So he looked at it and he said, well, I'm going to use the story as my education factor. And then let's go forward and make a blend that's going to be the most beneficial for our time. So he chose clove because of the eugenol, which is a very powerful anti-inflammatory agent. Eugenol is actually a natural anesthesia. It's antiseptic, it's antibacterial, and antimicrobial. That's what clove is in general. And it's really good on the global effect of the human terrain. So then he took rosemary. It was the rosemary officinalis, the 1.8 phenol, which is very specific as an antibacterial agent. So when you're dealing with microorganisms that create bacteria, you have got to have some strong substances, very strong and very powerful. And rosemary officinalis happened to be very powerful. Then he used eucalyptus radiata. He said that this is an oil that he's seen tremendous success with patients past and present when they've had needed respiratory support. And of course, the plague always attacked the respiratory tract. And because of that, and like people have problems with that nowadays, he said it just made sense to be putting the eucalyptus radiata in that formula. So out of the 17 stories that he read in Thieves, eucalyptus was an oil that was not in the formulations. But at that time in our world, eucalyptus was not being distilled or produced, and it wasn't available. But lemon, cinnamon, rosemary, and clove were 4 of the oils that were mentioned in the 17 stories. He used lemon because it was very plentiful and because it was pressed. Now, they didn't have, back in the day, they didn't have to distill it, and they pressed it probably in a cold expeller pressing of the rind. Now, was it really clean? No one knows the technique that they were doing, but it's a very effective as an antiseptic. And eucalyptus was really important because of the action on the microbial activity for the bacterial and viral information. So, or viral inflammation. So with that, like that kind of gives you a background. I find it fascinating. It's like how he put this together, why they use it, why we have an entire product line of Thieves, because it's like, these are natural ingredients that we can use for our health. So now that you know how Thieves is formed, there's a few other tidbits that I like giving the tidbits on it. There was a paper that Gary Young and Sue Chow published at Weaver State University, and that was regarding the diffusing of Thieves. So in 1997, they had demonstrated the killing power of these amazing oils against airborne microorganisms. And they showed that after 10 minutes of diffusing Thieves in the air, they took that against like and I'm going to go into all the details with it, but basically it's like a 99.96% effective at killing germs in the air. And it the study broke it down even further into the specific types that it was. And then I think like Thieves, like what can you do with Thieves is diffuse it in the air. We like diffusing it. Sometimes we will add orange to it. Sometimes we'll add peppermint to it just to change it up. And, as we're in a hotel room, what's the first thing that I put in the bathroom for the first like 2 hours is put the Thieves in, and then I put it in next to the bed. That's what we use. Okay, now the air is kind of clean out here. We will roll this on our family, on our feet. That's why I have a roller top on it. So like every single day, it's one of those things that we want to put on our feet. Now, if someone has been around someone where their immune system's compromised, okay, maybe we'll do it twice a day or 3 times a day. The other thing, it comes in a Vitality version. And so, but as you know, this bottle and Vitality are the same thing, but Vitality is going to show you that you can take it internal. Sometimes I'll just put a couple drops under my tongue. Other times, where you get that like tickle in your throat and you're like, not sure what that is. I generally will put 2 to 3 drops in a little Dixie cup of water, and then I will gargle with it and then just swallow it probably 3 times a day. And you should notice that that is really going to go away. Sometimes I'll put it on dryer balls. But I think the most part, that's what we do with it. Oh, and then we also make like an immune tea or immune boosting tea, where I'm going to take warm water, like a teaspoon of honey, 1 drop of Thieves because it's pretty potent, and then maybe about 4 to 5 drops of lemon, and just mix it in. And I'm not a tea drinker, but it is a pretty decent tasting tea to take with it. So Bonnie and Sarah, what do you want to add to Thieves?
I have a story with Thieves. I don't know. I learned this like really early on. Somebody shared this with me, and it kind of goes along with what Kara said about gargling with it. But honestly, if my throat starts feeling sore, or I know anybody who's got a sore throat, it's like put a drop on your thumb and put it on the roof of your mouth for 30 seconds. And I'm telling you, sore throat gone. I enrolled somebody by doing that one time. She had a super bad sore throat. I happened to be there, and I go, I got something that'll fix you right up. She did that. She was over at my house later that day enrolling, because it's like she had to have some of this stuff, right? So that's one of my secrets. I still do that. But I actually take Thieves internally every day. A lot of times I'll take it like through the inner defense capsule that we have. But if I don't have that, I'll just make up a Thieves capsule. I think it's just such a good immune boosting oil to have in your system every single day, like Kara does bottoms of the feet. I do that too sometimes, but I tend to take it more internally. So those are just some things to add.
I like that Kara shared the story of how Gary chose to blend thieves together, because one of the things that you see out there is um, every single version of thieves that we see now, or a copy of thieves, has that eucalyptus in it. And I've seen people just claim like, oh no, Gary directly copied what the thieves did. He did it exactly. But if you do any sort of research, just even Googling a little bit, you'll find that eucalyptus was not traded or even distilled as an oil until the late 1800s. So I've seen stuff like 1870, 1880, and this happened like in the 16th century. So it was like hundreds of years later that eucalyptus came to be a part of our essential oil just availability. They didn't have it back then. So if you see any thieves blends that have eucalyptus in it, you know those people directly copied Gary and how he chose to add that in there for the specific reasons that he added eucalyptus into this blend. The 4 thieves that were tried and asked to share the recipe, they didn't have access to eucalyptus and they did not use it. So I'm very grateful that Gary did that and brought that in there. One of the things that I thought was really cool was a number of years ago at convention, I met this scientist named Dr. H. Kalin, and he was doing a lot of research with our Boswellia artery, and people had come up to him and they had said stuff like, you know, you should research thieves, you should research thieves, and he became kind of interested in it. So he was trying to figure out like, what does thieves do when we're using it on our bodies or in our bodies or in our environment? Like, what does it do? Because he had heard a lot of people say like, ooh, thieves kill stuff. And he was like, does it really kill things? Like, you know, is that what it does? So he took it under a microscope and he was researching and he was just looking at what it does from a scientist's perspective. And what he told me that it does is thieves has a way to inhibit a protein translation. So when a bacteria or virus or you know, anything comes into your body that's foreign, and your immune system will go after it and try and kick it out. It's a race, right? So something comes into your body and I'll just say bacteria goes into your body, it comes in through your mouth or your nose, and its first goal is it wants to find a food source so that it can nourish itself. And then its next goal is it wants to replicate itself so that it can kind of take over, right? And your immune system is in a race right now to try and kick it out before it can do those two things. It doesn't want to establish itself in your body and find a food source and start the replication process. So when you're using thieves, what thieves does is it will break down that outside layer of that invader in your body, and it'll prevent it from actually integrating itself into your system, finding a food source, and then starting that replication process. So what thieves does in assisting our immune systems is it actually kind of becomes like, you know, like I'm fencing it in and I'm keeping it in this spot, and it's not going to do what it naturally wants to do. It's not going to find a food source. It's not going to start replicating. It's just going to be put in basically a cell until, like a prison cell, until your immune system comes and it goes, you know what, you are not invited here, and kicks it out. So I loved that explanation because I was really trying to figure out like, how exactly is Thieves working in tandem with our immune systems. And to me, that made a lot of sense because every single time your immune system fights something, it gets stronger and it does better the next time. You really want your immune system to be the one that's doing the work. You want your immune system to be flexing its muscles and rising to the occasion for anything that comes into your body. So if you have Thieves just kind of like corralling stuff over to this holding area until your immune system comes in and kicks it out, every single time Thieves and your immune system work together, your immune system gets stronger and better and just works even more productively than it did before. So we love Thieves, and I absolutely love that Young Living has an entire line with the Thieves in it so that we can use it every single day, either from our supplements, adding it in to like capsules, or using it in our cooking, or just using it as a roller, or washing our hands or our dishes or our clothes, or cleaning our house with Thieves. I'm so glad that Gary came up with that recipe and made it so that not only does it smell fantastic, but it's added into such a large product line that Young Living has so that we can get the benefit of using Thieves in our environment every single day.